Hey guys, welcome to the Bin Zone. On today's video, we're breaking down Hellbound Season 2, looking at that crazy ending, but also breaking down the fact that Chairman Jin Jang-soo is essentially a Korean Jesus and the role that religion plays in controlling society, because this entire season is about control over society. And most importantly, we're going to be looking at that crazy ending and could Tuffy be the Antichrist? With that being said, guys, I just received a decree that says if you don't hit the subscribe button, you will die in 3 days. I'm just kidding, but hit that subscribe button anyway because we really appreciate it, and let's just dive into the video. The season starts off with the resurrection of Chairman Jang Jin-soo. Now this is massive because, guys, if you remember the finale of the first season, it ended with the resurrection of Miss Park. You would expect this season to start off with the ramifications of her resurrection, but no. We're thrust into the resurrection of Chairman Jang Jin-soo. This resurrection does two main things to get us to understand the world of Hellbound. One, it establishes what hell is like in this universe. And two, it sets up Chairman Jin-soo as a messiah-like figure. As I'm watching this season, I'm noticing more and more as the show leans heavily onto the Abrahamic religions the most. You can see a bunch of different parallels between the New Truth, their religious doctrine, and Christianity or Islam. We're gonna get into that a little later in the video. After experiencing his own personal concept of hell for 8 long years, Chairman Jin-soo was brought back. But notice I said his own personal brand of hell, and that's because this world sets up hell differently. It establishes the fact that everyone who's been condemned to hell by the quote-unquote angel and beaten by the enforcers go and relive their own personal hell, traversing an endless web of multiverse of suffering. And it's just as terrible as it sounds. I know I, for one, could not endure that level of psychological torture for an eternity, because when we look through Jin-soo's perspective, he relives the death and the dying moments of everyone whose death he directly caused, which ties into his overall character and the way he lived his life. Jin-soo was a coward who caused the deaths of a lot of people, and due to that cowardice and need for self-preservation, his own personal hell was him suffering and dying and never getting that relief, never getting that self-preservation. And that's something he's been enduring for the past 8 years, because remember, he died in the first half of the first season, which takes place chronologically 8 years ago before the current events of Hellbound Season 2. Now imagine if he was never resurrected, he would be going through that for all of eternity. So when his resurrection happens and he's back, his cowardice multiplied tenfold, and he was in total self-preservation mode. Seeing as we saw in Season 1 that he's the founding father of New Truth, and he's the first person to actually give a decree to God's will, his sway on the religion and the world is at an all-time high, and he knows this. And that's why he wants to talk to Miss Park, because ever since his resurrection, he can see the reflections of the enforcer demons chasing him until ultimately he becomes one in the end. Before I really break that down, since it's such beautiful karmic justice, we're gonna save that for the end of the video. But Jin-soo's first order of business once he was brought back and he escaped Soto Firm was to go after Arrowhead and become their leader, because he understood exactly what he needed: fanatics that were easy to control. It started with the first season, but in the second season, it exacerbated. Arrowhead became its own sect of the religion, its own radical branch. Ever since Jin-soo's proclamation in the first season, the world has been fractured, and now it's an all-out battle for control that mirrors real life. You have New Truth as one form of religion, Arrowhead as another form of religion. Then you have Soto Firm, which represents realistically big business vying for control of society. And then you have the government. And one thing we know about governments across the world, they want to have sole monopoly of control on their people. And all of them really don't care or believe in any of the things they talk about. It's only as a means to control the population. And that's what the season really dives into. And that direct control comes from manipulating the resurrected one, aka Miss Park. Because while Jin-soo overall is the more important figure, Miss Park coming back, and what that means, she was the first one to give a public demonstration, and her resurrection really tips the scale of exactly where the belief system lies in this world. And that's why New Truth kept her under control. The government allowed this to happen, and when the government was ready and they felt that Arrowhead had grown too radical, they were going to have New Truth use Miss Park as a new messianic figure, the resurrected one that would condemn Arrowhead and thus turn society against them. Because in the 4 years between Season 1 and Season 2, Arrowhead's influence has grown so much to the point where they control sectors of society, and we see everyday citizens joining Arrowhead, becoming more radical at the thought and doctrines of a religious order. When Chon Si-young is explaining to Jin-soo why he hates him and what Jin-soo did to his wife, we find out about his wife Ji-won, a regular housewife with a regular job who lived an ordinary life. But once Jin-soo started his rhetoric and they started seeing the ghoulish enforcers condemn people to hell, your average everyday person who has nothing going on with their life, who's looking for a deeper meaning, they start listening and they start believing what Jinsu's saying. They start following their religious leaders. That kind of mirrors society, and you see where I'm going with this. Until she ultimately becomes a radical jihadist, aka Miss Sunday, who is one of the most fanatical followers of Arrowhead. The more people who join and the more radical they become, they radicalize the entire religion. Arrowhead was already radical. Lee, as the spokesperson in season 1, was radical, but he was nothing compared to Pinwheel. Pinwheel took what Lee was doing and took it to the next level, actively participating in Arrowhead's crimes as society cheers him on. But because Arrowhead stems from New Truth, they ultimately believe in the same doctrine, similar to the Abrahamic religions who believe in the same God. And if their God's Messiah figure actually showed up, they would fall in line. So when Chairman Jing-Soo comes back, he could have controlled any faction that he wanted. And we saw this when he was talking to the government and he told them how much he doesn't care for Arrowhead or the religion. But because he's looked as this messianic figure, he can manipulate any side he wants. But really what he wants is to escape his demons. And that's why he wants Miss Park. And when the two finally have their conversation and she establishes that that's his own personal hell and she doesn't see the monsters that are chasing him, she sees something else. She sees the future death of people. Kind of like how the angels come out of nowhere and can tell you when you're gonna die. Miss Park can also see that. But the most different thing between the two characters is the fact that she herself, while she was suffering her own personal hell, never gave up faith in seeing her kids one day. Even when she was resurrected, she was living in a form of hell because New Truth kept her locked away from her kids. And when Min reunited her with her children in the end, her faith ultimately paid off. And to me, that's a hilarious dichotomy. I don't know if you guys caught it. The fact that the actual founder of the religion didn't have any real faith, and when they started suffering, they only thought of themselves. But a hard working class mother who only did the demonstrations the first season to have money to provide for her kids' livelihood, and despite all the suffering she was enduring, only thought of her children over herself, was the one who was able to go on and live a normal life, while Jin-Soo became the very enforcers that he feared. And that's why he became a ghoulish entity. That was what he feared. His own personal hell manifested, even traversing through every other universe. He was afraid of that one thing and he became it. Miss Park, the only thing she was afraid of was losing her kids, but she never gave up hope that one day she would see her kids, and she saw her kids. What's interesting is at the end of the season, Miss Min ultimately adopts Tuffy, but we learned in the very last scene that when her parents Young Ja and Song were burned in the first season, she was burned along with them, but she was resurrected right then and there. No one noticed because of Lee's shenanigans and the fight that ensued afterwards, but she was the first resurrected one. And that made me wonder, could all this be going haywire because she ultimately is the Messiah or the Antichrist? The fact that Min was able to take her away really ties into the fact that this is the rise of some sort of Antichrist story. And we haven't seen the last of Chairman Jin-Soo either. He will be back. Because even though Chairman Kim told the world about his secret, they don't believe it. And at the end, all the quote-unquote angels started showing up and giving everyone decrees, sending society in a downward spiral. Miss Park told Min that the world would be ending soon. She foresaw this, almost as though everyone who's resurrected has some sort of special ability. So that means Tuffy must have an ability. And she was a baby. What could her greatest fear be? The first thing she ever saw, a floating head in the sky. So ultimately, she may be the one responsible for this, but we will explore that further in season 3. And I, for one, can't wait for that to happen. But guys, that's just my thoughts on it. I'd love to hear your thoughts about it in the comment section below. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up, hit the subscribe button, and until next time, peace.